Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to, as I said, the February Slow Flowers member meetup. I'm Deborah Prinzing, and I'm delighted that you're all here. We're all kind of recovering from Valentine's Day, I think. At least I am, mainly because last week was the Northwest Flower and Garden Festival here in Seattle. We had a really great, exhaustive week, and I see that Teresa Rao is here. She and Misty Vanderweel, both of them were in town to speak. So congratulations, ladies. You did a wonderful job. And we're waiting for Tonali. She'll log in a minute, our membership manager, and we'll introduce her too. But housekeeping wise, I just want to mention if you can keep yourself on mute, it looks like most people are doing that. We are going to have time for questions and answers. And I think maybe just put your questions in the chat. That way, Tonali and I will see them and we will feed them to Lenny. So welcome, Lennie Larkin, of longtime friend, longtime Slow Flowers member. How are you?
Great. I'm great. It's really wonderful to be here, Deborah. Thanks for having me. And to see
Oh,
so many familiar faces and names up there too. Some people who I'm sure are sick of me because I've been in my classes and stuff. But yeah, it's
well,
wonderful to be here. Thank
well,
you.
they're getting the bonus edition today. That's
Yeah.
great. Well, listen, Lenny and I go back way back through I guess just meeting through the flower farming community. And I can picture being at an ASCFG conference in the Bay Area. And it was the first time you gave a presentation. I remember that you kind of acted starstruck because all your heroes were there, but talk a
Yes.
little bit about the full arc of your business and where you are today. It must be fun to look back at that and realize you hung in there and got to the point where now you've built a really exciting facet of your business.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's funny. I had been farming for a few years and really went to school for farming, went out to UC Santa Cruz to do the apprenticeship there and then worked there. So I had some in-depth experience by the time I really started my own farm. I was running a vegetable farm and started mine. So by the time I really started B-side farm, I was already in the position to teach about what I was doing. And so, I mean, I think I had a lot left to learn, but I remember speaking at that conference in San Jose so vividly. Actually, to talk about it in my book. It was like the first when I was, setting out to write my book, which we'll talk about, and I was feeling really had a lot of writer's block, I guess. I just did not know where to start. And I was like, talk about that first talk at the ASCFG where you spoke in front of that room and you had sort of no idea what you were doing, but you were very excited about it. And so I just started writing about that experience and what I've learned ever since, because my career has really grown with my involvement with the ASCFG and the community. So let's see. Yeah, I was
By the way, Lenny, was
yeah,
that 2016, I
I
think? Or
think so. I think
okay.
so.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
can
right around
vividly
there.
remember having coffee with you after that in that hotel lobby.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
Um, yeah, I know, Deborah, I feel like you and I have known each other forever at this point, which is sort of wonderful. And I've gotten to see you in person so many times over the years too, which is just awesome.
Yeah, so fast forward, now B-Side Farm has had a relocation. Lennie Larkin has had many opportunities to research and teach, and all of that is kind of embodied in this brand new book, Flower Farming for Profit. You've got the cover there, or the book there, Lenny,
Yes.
so hold it up.
Yeah.
And congratulations. I know this was a labor of love that COVID kind of slowed down your process, but it's just out last month, right?
Yes, just out last month. I just saw Janet, I think, also hold up her book here in the room. I love that.
Oh, yeah. We'll do a virtual signing.
That's really fun.
Yeah, so I got you off track a little bit. You're we've kind of described like a decade of flower farming, and all of that intel and knowledge is captured in these lessons in the book. So
Yeah.
maybe let's talk a little bit about how you came to the point where flower farming was more time consuming for you than vegetable farming, but you still had other activities in agriculture. So I don't want to say side hustle, but it was sort of you were juggling it,
Right.
and somehow you decided to go all in and really make a profitable business.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was in my early 30s, I guess, had come from another career in social work and adult education and writing, all these other things. moved to California, did the farming program at UC Santa Cruz, then was running a vegetable farm for a few years, Petaluma Bounty. And my job there was really half teacher and half farmer. It was a community farm. So I was teaching people how to farm. So that's never changed. I've been teaching the whole time I've been farming, but I really realized that flowers were my love, my thing. And I'd never felt any sort of calling in my life to anything. And then flowers was a total 180 for me. It was like, oh yeah, this is it. And so I started my own farm on the side.
So
I
many
did,
of us can relate to
I
that,
know,
Lenny.
absolutely. It's like all of it. Yeah, absolutely. We're like, there should be a movie. I was picturing like, tons of people wandering around the globe, like aimless, and then they find flowers and they know what to do. It's like a cartoon in the making or something.
I love it.
Um, but so yeah, I started B-side farm on the side when I was running a vegetable farm, which was just wild because I mentioned that I was in my early 30s. I was getting up at the crack of dawn or before, which is not atypical for farmers, obviously, but going outside, working my own farm, then going to work, running the vegetable farm for 8 or 9 hours, then coming home and finishing up harvest or whatever on my flower farm at home. So having two jobs of any kind is a lot, as we all know. Having two farming jobs was just crazy. It's crazy, but I did it because that's how passionate I felt. Um, yeah, and after a few
Plus, you're like,
years,
how hard can it be? Of course we can figure this out.
totally, right? I can do it. Like as long as I can still stand and walk and use my hands, I can still farm, right? And
Yeah.
I mean, looking back, it took a toll, you know what I mean? There's other parts of my life that I didn't pay as close attention to. I wish I'd taken better care of my skin, all these things, my back, all these things. But at the time, it all made sense. Just, yeah, be out in the sun for 12 hours a day. That's no problem. So, I started my flower farm on the side and was able to really take off with it because I had this farming background and I had started selling to a few florists through my vegetable farm where we also grew sunflowers on the side. So I started developing those relationships and was easy to I was able to hand those over to my flower farm as I moved on,
Mm.
and then just went full speed ahead with my flower farm. So I was able to, like, year one, I was able to already become profitable and do pretty well. But I really burned out in those first few years. And this is where I really made this transition to learning how to, work smarter, not harder. And I was really angry at the state of our local farming industry, flower
Mhm.
farms and veggie farms. Everyone was just burning themselves out. And I could tell that no one was actually doing that well, like financially, and it's one thing to start a business and know that you're going to take a financial hit, but if you have a clear path to making a profit, but most of us didn't have that. We just kept
Right.
working, figuring it would work out. And I started scaling up my farm because that's what I thought you were supposed to do at the time. I'm like, in order to make money, you need to grow more, right? So I started leasing more fields. And then I kind of hit a breaking point, and I one day realized this isn't just going to pencil out. I'm going to be one of those overworked farmers for the rest of my life. I'm never going to be able to contribute to my retirement unless I start getting smart about this. So that's when I really learned how to become a full service florist, to really add that component to my business and do better with the weddings and get better weddings, and learned how to research small business skills that I could bring back and implement on my farm in order to do better.
So now all of that, all of that knowledge, when people say, can I pick your brain? That brain is now uh, kind of, you did a brain dump into the book and
Yes.
it's just like, here's how I did it. And here's some, I mean, it's very complicated and scary to think about, oh, I have to learn cost accounting or something like that.
Right.
You've broken it down because you're a farmer, what are the inputs that people need to be tracking? How do they measure, everything from labor to cost of seeds, and come up with sort of a understanding of, like under the microscope, what is your
Yes.
business like?
Yes.
Um, so I want to put up the table of contents for the book and sort of have you walk us through that, if that's okay.
That'd be great.
And I mean, that was the best thing we could think of, is to say, well, maybe we'll use this as our outline. So let me pull that up here and can everybody see that? Can you see that, Lenny?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. So you've broken the book into three categories. And I think maybe you're not teaching people how to be flower farmers here. Like that's not really the
Right.
point of this book.
Right.
There are other books that do that.
Right. Yep. I feel my feeling is that most people who get into this have been gardening beforehand and they are already eager to learn how to grow more plants and they have the resources for that. They have the ASCFG, they have Lisa Mason Ziegler's books, they have Florette's books, they have, YouTube. Like there's so much on YouTube these days, and there's just practical experience in the garden that people have had passed down from their grandparents, whatever it is. So my feeling was let's support those growing skills and add business skills to them. And let's have this
Yes.
book be the one that sits next to those books, but teaches you about marketing and accounting and all these things.
Yeah. Say that again. Let's support growing skills with the next iteration, which is understanding the
Business.
business.
Yeah,
Really good
absolutely.
point.
Yeah. I'm always so envious of this title. I'm sure some of you know Julia Shanks. She's wonderful and just wrote her second edition of The Farmer's Office. And I think that name is so brilliant, The Farmer's Office. It just says it so succinctly. And I wish I had thought of that name. It's so good. The Flower Farmer's Office.
Like you're in the field or you're in the office.
Yeah,
Got it.
absolutely.
Got it. All
And
right.
most farmers are not spending enough time in the office.
Well, we're in Lenny's office today. So,
Yes.
becoming a flower farmer, I don't know, is there anything you want to touch on relating to that? I think maybe some of the very basic things about, knowing your market and knowing your sales channels are really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I talk about in this first section how there's a lot of um, things you need to wrap your head around that sort of feel like the chicken and the egg conundrum. Like, well, I need to decide what I'm going to grow, but how do I know what crops to grow if I don't know who I'm selling to? Well, how do I know who I'm selling to if I haven't tried to sell them any crops yet? It's really challenging. So I try to just note that. I say there's no magic bullet to figuring out your market, to figuring out your ideal customer, to connecting with people in your local marketplace. But here's a few strategies you can use to start to figure it out. And while you're figuring out some things over here, you're also figuring out some things over here. And if you have a strategic mindset, it eventually begins to kind of coalesce and you can begin to sketch out a business plan for yourself. Because there's so many options of where to sell your flowers. And I think it behooves us to be really strategic about who we're partnering with to sell our flowers to. So this
Well,
first part is like, yeah, diving in from the get-go.
yeah, and I recently interviewed Lenny for an article that will be in the Johnny's Seeds newsletter next month. And Lenny, I just have to say, the sales channels conversation or like checklist of which one is the most profitable, that factors into the other sections of this book, right? Because if you're looking at profitability, you're drilling down onto asking yourself, is this the right sales channel or can I be all things to all people, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I think you have a quote from that art, just because I got to take a look at that article before it goes live. I think from Nikki Irving at
Flourish.
Flourish. I just interviewed someone, Christy from Nourish Gardens yesterday. So in my head, I was wanting to say Nourish, of course. Flourish, I've been
I
there.
like them both.
I know they're both so wonderful. And they're both like these beautiful farms that I visited one and I want to visit the other. But so Nikki said that in your interview with her, she told you that she created a matrix for how to decide which sales channels were working for her. And I loved that concept. And that's really, you said it really well. We're trying to look at these sales channels at more and evaluate them by more than just the top line revenue. So it's not just about, okay, well, I can make $1,000 at a Saturday farmers market, whereas if I was selling to florists, I would only bring in $700, whatever it is. But you really need to look at the costs behind each sales channel. So I'm deep into I teach an online course. It's like an online business school for flower farmers, Flower Farming Business Academy. And we just finished the section, the module where we talk about really comparing sales channels. And I'm wanting people to really dive in and compare the costs of each, compare the wholesale value of flowers each, and really, really look at your labor involved with each sales channel. So I always throw CSAs under the bus, and I don't really mean to, but I just see so many flower farmers doing them and spending so much time on these bouquets and so much time dropping off these bouquets to people's homes or to different pickup points. And I know these farmers are spending so much time on these programs and these specific CSA bouquets, and I know they're not charging enough for them. Like if you're charging a wholesale price point for this CSA bouquet that it's taken you half an hour to create or whatever, even 10 minutes to create, you're not making your money back on that time. So it's just what you said. It's looking at these sales channels and trying to compare them with data.
Mm. Well, let's scroll down to the planning for profitability section. And I didn't really know how to show this PDF without going all the way through it. So you're all going to get treated to some of the beautiful images. So this is that first section, becoming a flower farmer, which is, obviously um, meaty because it's making people pause and say, like, what is it going to cost me to be a flower farmer? And these are some of the, this chart here about startup costs. Is there anything else you want to add in here, Lenny, that I don't want to jump ahead too fast?
No, that's fine. But I think, I think there's a lot of nerves floating around when people are starting a flower farm. So this chapter here that you're scrolling through just really gives people a sense of what they're going to need. Here's what your startup costs might look like. Here's what kind of money you might be making. Here are the people you're going to need on your team,
Mhm.
your circle of advisors. It doesn't need to be people you actually employ, but people you have in your orbit.
Mm, mm,
And we
right.
talk a lot about numbers here. This book is really, I try to have lots of data and tables and numbers, and I'm still gathering more. I do a bunch of grant funded research on this kind of thing, on benchmarks and cost of production. And we don't have that much data in the flower farming world, but I'm trying to collect it and I'm trying to put it out there, even if it's not perfect. So here we have a table that shows how your markups might change from selling to one type of customer to the other. And I think this concept is new for a lot of new business owners, like how to strategically think through your pricing and how you're marking it up based on how much value you're adding to those flowers.
Mm.
So at the very bottom, it's grocery. You might be selling a bunch of flowers to grocery for $5, and you might mark up that same bunch 4.5 times to do a full service wedding to $45.
I think
So
this is also so it's like you're giving people permission to realize that every market or every customer channel, it has to be treated individually. By
yes,
the amount of, like you said, your creative input, your labor input, what the competitive rates are. It's useful for everyone to create a chart like this and put their own numbers in there in
yes,
terms of the markup.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Wow. Um,
And
let's see.
sorry, can I point out one more thing about that?
Yeah.
I got
Hmm.
into an interesting conversation with Ellen Frost on Facebook the other day because she casually said, "Oh, well, I'm reading your book, Lenny, and I had a question." And I was like, you know, touched already that Ellen Frost is reading my book because she's so wonderful and such a wonderful resource for all of us. But she was really pointing out the markup, and you don't all need to look at these numbers specifically right now, but I've been trying to figure out what's going on at farmers markets, what's going on with pricing at farmers markets across the country. And it seemed to me that farmers have dropped their prices at farmers markets so that they're selling them around the same price point that they're selling to florists for. Sorry, that was a horrible sentence. So
No, no, I get it. Well, you see it right here. You
see
have
it
the
here.
1x,
Yeah.
right?
And I said that this table I was sort of meant to depict what is happening out there, whereas really what I would like to see is a markup at farmers market to 2x, maybe a $20 bunch that you would sell to a florist for $10. Because, in this way we are also supporting our florists, and florists need they need room for a margin as well. It's a tricky life being a florist. It's a whole other set of challenges than what we have as farmers. And if we're selling our flowers to farmers markets for the same price as we're selling to florists, just think about that end customer and how they could go to the farmers market and buy the flowers for you for $10. So they're not going to go to the florist and want to buy them for $20. And in some
Yeah.
markets, they're so big and so complicated that this kind of, there aren't negative consequences that are carried over to the florist, but it's really something to think about. And especially in small communities, where consumers are savvy and paying attention to these things, we just need to think about how we can support every person along the supply chain, basically from the farmer to the wholesaler to the florist to the end customer, because we're all in this together.
Well, even taking it to that's an excellent point, and just thinking about that, like taking it to the next iteration, the farmers market should have a higher markup than the farm stand because your labor is so much higher
Yes.
than just stocking your own farm stand,
Yes.
um,
Such a great point,
which
Deborah.
you don't
Yeah.
have to do the customer service on. Whereas at the farmer's market, it's,
Right.
it's in general, it's a big time suck.
Right.
Wow. All right. Well, that's our good takeaway is we're all going to create our own chart about around this.
Yeah.
And florists can do it too, because florists have different channels.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ellen has such great resources for both farmers and florists about how
Yeah.
to look at that relationship and make sure we're supporting each other. Anyway, so she just really got me thinking.
Yeah.
She zeroed in on that number,
Yeah,
which
that's
I love.
important.
Yeah.
That's really important. Sales projections, these are three sort of, again, just looking at different models based on your acreage.
I wanted to give some rough numbers of how much money you might be making as a flower farmer. There are outliers, there are caveats, there's all that, but that doesn't mean that we can't, you know, put these numbers on paper and look at them. And I think it's just so helpful.
Yeah, I love it. So you talk about the different models. Here you're talking about researching your market and narrowing what's right for you. And I think you've done this, Lenny. You've been a farmer florist. You've done big weddings, and
Yeah.
then you've pulled back in the Bay Area or in Northern California. You really had this successful farm stand. So
Yeah.
how do you make those decisions?
Right. So I encourage all my students, and we just went through this in my Flower Farming Business Academy course, where I'm having them really zero in on each potential sales channel. Some of them, have been selling for a number of years, so I'm having them examine each of their current sales channels. Others are just getting started, so I say, well, let's look at what you think, what you're planning on doing. And we're going to compare them based on costs, based on potential revenue, based on scalability, based on ease, based on how they fit with the rest of your farm, and how also how much you like them.
Mhm.
I try to encourage people to put feelings aside in order to pay attention to numbers and data and make decisions based on that. But of course, I want people to be doing what makes them happy too. But the secret is that I've learned that really what's going to make you happy ultimately is what's going to propel your business forward and allow you to make enough money to live off of and then to be able to have some sort of work-life balance. So you might set out thinking, oh, I'm not a wholesale type of person. I would rather interact with my end customer, whatever it is. But then years down the road, you may find that wholesale is by far and away the best way for you to be selling. And that's going to make you happier
Mhm.
than whatever you thought your personality was at the beginning. It's just ever shifting. But
Yeah.
my farm stand, yeah, I scaled down my farm and stopped selling so much wholesale because I was in a market where I had a real potential to build a profitable farm stand. And I started a farm stand on the side. It was just a place to sell our extra flowers. And honestly, it was the way that I was going to pay for my first full-time employee. I was
Mm.
hiring my friend at the time, Eliza. She's all over my book. I realize I have so many pictures of her. But I said, how can we pay for Eliza's salary? How can I make sure I have enough money to hire a full-time employee? And I did a projection for what I hoped to bring in from the farm stand, and it was modest. Maybe she wasn't quite full-time, like three-quarters time. And I set out to pay for her job by the farm stand, and it did. And then over the years, I grew the farm stand to bringing in around 125 to 150 grand in sales a year just from a little shack farm stand on the side of the road. There it is there.
Here we go. Yeah.
Yeah. And the
Nice
way I was
farm.
able to do it is because I really paid attention to my markups. I marked up all my flowers 3 times from what I would sell them to florists. And I made quick bouquets and they were beautiful. So it was really successfor Yeah.
That's something else I take away from the most recent interview I did with you, whereas you assign prices to types of stems, and when you're making a bouquet very quickly, when you get to $10, you stop
Yeah.
because that the 3x is the $30 bouquet. I thought
Yeah.
that was brilliant.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. I know. It's so funny, these simple things, but if you stick to them, they pencil out in the end. And there was my first farm stand, which was
Mm.
so beautiful. My father-in-law, my partner's father built it for me, and I just loved it. We
And
still
this
have
was
that
in
sign.
Northern California. You have relocated to Oregon. So did
Yes.
you this stayed where it was because you
This
sold this,
stayed,
right?
yeah. I was actually able to sell the structure to a friend who came and broke it down and rebuilt it on her farm. And then my second farm stand, I was actually able to sell that business, sell the farm stand business as I moved away. So that was really helpful. I was
It's amazing.
yeah, I was able to kind of give this business plan to the farmer who took it over and say, if you do these things, these are the kind of numbers you should see. This is how exactly how I did it. It was able to get her off with a running start at the farm stand, and she was able to take advantage of all the traffic I had built up over the years, and I was able to bring in a little bit of money to help with the transition to moving our farm to Oregon. So it was wonderful.
That's brilliant. And that just makes me think that a location does factor in quite a bit
Yes,
to the success.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about where you are now? Will you do a farm stand?
I'm not sure. We're still figuring it out. Probably not. We are sort of on a dead end road. It kind of doesn't end directly past our house, but a while beyond that. People are moving fast.
Hmm.
It's also, yeah, it's a different kind of marketplace. We're still figuring out exactly who our customer will be here, but we're 45 minutes outside of Portland, Oregon, and we're going to be really focusing our energies there rather than on the hyper local
Hmm.
market where we
Hmm.
are.
But you know enough now to make that decision,
Yeah.
which is part of the beauty of it. Lenny, what do you want me to do you want me to go to the next chapter? Because we're still on
Yeah.
sale.
Let's
How
see.
big is this book? We're at page
I know,
55.
it
It's
never ends.
amazing.
Let's talk
No.
about weddings for a minute because I
Okay.
know that I know Slow Flowers is I know a lot of the conferences it's like 50-50 farmers and florists. I don't know if
Yeah.
the overall membership if that's sort of the
It's
same.
really the intersection of where farming and design come together. So I do
Yeah.
appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah. I love this bouquet. I haven't done weddings in a while, and looking back at some of my bouquets from the past, I'm like, ooh, okay, I do miss weddings after all.
And that's one of your designs,
That's one of
Lenny.
them. I see that
Oh,
tiny, tiny orange GM peeking out from like the back left, and I'm like, oh, that's perfection, that little GM. Um, but yeah, floral design and weddings, if people are on here watching the replay and I know you have a lot of florists who really specifically support local farmers and florists who also are starting to grow more of their own flowers. It's funny, we kind of come at it from two angles. There's the farmers like me who started farming and then ended up learning how to design and doing weddings. And then you have the florists who are learning how to grow so that they can support some of their own designs with their own flowers. And I really love weddings for their ability to be predictable in terms of the costs and the labor and the profit. I mean, there's so many other reasons I love weddings. There's also a bunch of reasons I don't love weddings, but farming is just so um complicated. It's not harder than floral design. It's not harder than running weddings. It's just there's more moving pieces. And weddings, you there sure there's so much that's out of your control, but in terms of the business model, I found that there's a lot more you can control. Again, not that it's
yeah.
easier. It's
You know all the
categorically not
variables,
easier.
you know all the
Yeah,
variables and what the outcome needs to be. And
exactly.
you can make choices to be more profitable in those variables.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm working on this is when my big master class type class that I'm doing now is over, but I'm working on a new kind of profitable wedding course, a short course for people, just to help people make sure they are doing beautiful work they're proud of, but also making a living doing it because
Mm.
it's so hard. It's so easy to not make money. It's so easy to work so hard year after year after year and not be supporting yourself.
And
And that's
just tread water and
just
maintain. You don't
treading
want to do that.
water. And then you go out of business. And I don't want to see more florists or farmers go out of business.
Mm.
So yeah, just floral design weddings. It's not every farmer needs to take on weddings. It's not for everyone at all. But if you love design, there are ways to do it and put up great boundaries with your customers and still go above and beyond for your customers, but also maintain some
Mm.
balance yourself. There are ways to do it. It's just
Hmm.
difficult.
Well, you're a real stickler about tracking labor. So this is an interesting chart, sample wedding calendar from start to finish to looking at what do you
Yeah,
spend? What do you
right.
spend for every touch and for every action?
Absolutely. And some people might look at this and say, "Ooh, that's a lot of time." And others might look at this and say, "Oh, I spend twice as long as that." But no matter what the slight differences are between your schedule and mine, at some sort of approximation of the the care and the communication that is needed when dealing with wedding clients necessarily because they're planning what's often like the biggest day of their lives, right? So, yeah, from receiving their inquiry to responding to it to responding to little questions over the so many months that you're working with them And I have gotten way more stripped down and strategic in my communication, but still, this is not unrealistic to
It's
expect that you might spend this
crazy.
much time. Yeah,
It's crazy to add it all up and say, are you kidding me? You spend 90 hours on a wedding.
right.
The couple has literally no idea. They probably think that
Absolutely.
you're skipping through the fields and making them a bouquet in 5 minutes. It's crazy.
Totally. When I hear that thing like, oh, you just tack the word wedding on anything and people charge you 5 times the normal price, it's like, yeah, because there's so much at stake and you have to be so perfect for your customer. They're so demanding. And again, I haven't found the bridezilla thing to be that true. Most people I've worked with have been really wonderful, but still they're demanding and they deserve to be demanding. It's their
Mm,
wedding day, but it's
mm.
just so much care and work and worry goes into it. And for those florists who are inexperienced, I would triple this number. I just know you. I know you out there because I was you. You spend so much extra time worrying about these clients, remaking bouquets, getting up in the middle of the night to check your flowers in the cooler to see if they've frozen, even if it's like 70 degrees out. Just like you worry and you're a giver and you're a people pleaser, and so you spend so much extra time and therefore you're not making any money. If you looked
No.
at your hourly rate, it's like $2 an hour,
Yeah, I know. Even really experienced florists have learned that lesson. One of our florists, Slower Flowers members said COVID kind of forced her to do that. And she
Yeah.
realized she was making $14 an hour
Yeah.
over the course of the season. And the local nursery like tripled her salary if she came over to work for them as a plant buyer. And she kind of did the math and was like, this is an easy decision, even though she
Right.
loves weddings.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Ugh.
most of us when we're bringing on employees in the first few years of our business, most of them are making more money than we do. That's just the reality.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for touching on weddings. I think that's really important. And it's also very important for florists to look at in terms of, um, what their profitability is, because I
Yeah.
think it is seductive to have those gorgeous photos to put on Instagram, but are they paying the bills?
Yeah. Right.
Right. Okay. So let's go to the next section and then we're going to go. People are already posting questions. So
Great.
I hope that's okay. There's a recipe there, so that's helpful. Lenny, this book is just packed with information. Oh my gosh. And this is a section I wanted to touch on briefly, the planning for profitability, because one of the questions that someone just posted in the chat was that she's got your book. She's hoping to take your class next year. What is the specific data she should be pulling together this year so that her participation in your class is more beneficial?
Ooh, I
Which is a
love
great
that.
question. Like what can people be doing now for when they really are ready to dive in?
Yeah. The number one thing I would say is to start tracking your sales data. So if you are just writing invoices on little slips of paper, or you're selling in a bunch of informal ways and you're not like invoicing through QuickBooks or something like that, which is what I do, I want you to be keeping track of how many bunches you sold, of which flowers and to who and when. So just start keeping track of that in a spreadsheet. And it can feel a bit redundant if you do have to write it out on paper and then you're also noting it on a spreadsheet. But I'm not worried about that redundancy. That 5 extra minutes a day or 15 extra minutes a week, whatever, is not gonna, it's still moving you in the right direction with your business. And this is data you're gonna need. So sales history, that's the number one thing. The next thing is yield data. So how much does one bed of zinnias on your farm, how many stems can you pick from that? How many stems did you pick and sell from that this year? Um, those are two huge things.
Hmm.
In this, so I would, full stop. Those are the two things. Those are the two most important things. I also really care about waste, how much on a farm is not cut and sold. And I'm not talking about from an environmental perspective. I also am a regenerative flower farmer, but that's not what I mean when I say waste here. I mean, how how much are you overplanting that you're not even cutting? Most of us are growing way more than we cut and sell, and that's just wasted labor, wasted time, wasted money, wasted bandwidth. So I really want people to start keeping track of like when you're doing the last cut of your bed of zinnias or one succession of zinnias for the season. I would love for you to take a step back and say, okay, about how much of this bed was I not able to cut and sell because I couldn't get to it or because there wasn't demand for it? Was it 50% of the bed? Was it 10% of the bed? You can take a guess. That's totally fine, but just note it. Um, and then finally, I mean, crop cost of production is its whole, it could be a whole book. Um, and so in my class, and specifically in my grant funded research, I work with groups of farmers to help them track really specifically their cost of production on crops. So you're able to say, if I only have 20 beds on my farm, would I be better off growing these crops or these crops? And you're able to track them throughout the year and see which ones are underperforming and then cut those. Like which ones are the least profitable for you.
Mm.
Actually, you guys, you'll share later, Deborah, I know, or in the chat, there's a link to join my mailing list. And when you join it through the link that I sent to Deborah and her team, you're able to download these cost of production templates. They're just simple tables where you can start to note all the labor that went into growing your crops and then calculate that and see which ones are more profitable for you. It is sort of a complicated process, but I walk you through it in the book. I walk you through it in my course, and I hope to in the future develop like a shorter course where people can come learn about this in just a few hours rather than, rather
Right.
than having to spend so much time
I
learning.
mean, the sky's the limit. You could just break everything down into these small modules and people could kind of
Yeah,
a la
pick and
carte, go a la
choose.
carte off of a
Yeah.
menu. Yeah. Yes. Is that the link you sent me yesterday for the Johnny's article?
Actually, I sent you the link I sent you earlier this morning is the same one. I just decided let's just use the same
Okay,
link for
I'll
people
pop
to
it
join
in.
my mailing list. Thank
I'll
you. Yeah,
pop it
yeah.
in. I'm going to do that while you answer this next question.
Great.
And this question is from Laurel Swinston. And she asked about selling to restaurants and like for bud vases and all of that, restaurants and cafes. But then she said, when you track your labor to determine profitability, do you put a dollar amount behind every hour you spend? For example, do you apply $20 an hour in labor to determine profitability and how you should price your flowers? She's just curious what dollar per hour she should calculate for her
Yeah.
labor.
Awesome. Hi,
Yeah.
Laurel. I love both of these questions. Yes, absolutely. Plug in a labor amount for you, even if you're not yet paying yourself. And I think you know why. I mean, I love it when a question is asked and it's like, oh, you have so much knowledge. I can tell how much knowledge you have just by virtue of you asking this specific question. But yes, if you're not paying yourself yet, plug in a dollar amount for all of your labor. And I think $20 is a great starting place. I sometimes recommend minimum wage if you're just starting out and you're not bringing in much money yet. I usually plug in around $20 an hour. And people have specifically asked me if they're plugging in a wage for themselves or for their workers, if they're supposed to include um, other other like payroll costs and stuff
Mm.
like that. And that's like a more advanced topic, but yes, you could absolutely. So if you're paying someone $18 an hour, you might plug in more like 22 or $23 an hour to account for all the costs. But
Mm.
so yes, absolutely value your time because that's the only way you're going to be able to grow your business and hire help and not take a big cut when you do so.
Mhm.
And the other question about restaurants. So my honest, natural like answer to the question of our restaurants a good sales channel for farmers, for flower farmers? And it's no. I've hardly ever
Unless you want
seen
a
it.
lot of trades as
Yeah,
Chez Panisse and your Max Gill,
right. Yeah,
and he
absolutely.
gets paid.
Yeah, right. And it's so beautiful. I was in California a few weeks ago and we went there for dinner to celebrate my book launch. It was so wonderful. And seeing the
Oh,
flowers
wow.
there. Yeah.
That's like a bucket list.
It was amazing. I know we did go to the cafe, which is the cheaper, it's not the like $150 fixed price menu. We went to the like casual one, but still, it was beautiful.
I got you
Um,
off topic, but
yes. I'm
it
like, do you want
sounds
to hear
like,
about the salad I had there? It was amazing.
yeah, we want to hear about it.
Yeah, restaurants. Yes, there are only honestly, I could count on one hand the number of farmers I know who have success moving their flowers through restaurants. And
Mm.
there's just a number of reasons why it's a tricky proposition. The first is that restaurants, most of them just don't have a real budget for flowers. So they
Mhm.
might try out something with you for a while, but they're probably going to be have lower budget than what you need. And then once the management changes, or once they look at their quarterly P&L statement, or what any number of things that happen in the restaurant industry happen, and then the flowers are the first thing to go. Or they come back to you and say, I know we used to do bud vases, but now could we just buy a simple bucket from you? We don't have the money to spend like we used to. And it's just not typically worth your time. Most of the farmers I know who end up trying this out are spending too much time futzing over these flowers, even if it is just a bucket or even if it is just a few bud vases.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the restaurants aren't able to take enough flowers, and they're not able to pay much above wholesale price. So I would
Yeah.
not focus my energy there. And you might think like, yeah, but there's, I'm getting my name out there.
It's
Sure,
good marketing or
a
whatever.
little
Yeah.
bit, but I think there's other ways, there's better ways of marketing. And I would rather you spend money on a marketing budget in getting your name out there rather than wasting your time doing flowers at restaurants. So
Mm-hmm.
sure, if you want to try it out, no problem. But I don't have any reason to have high hopes for that for anyone.
I would say, Lenny, I've heard the same thing from people who sell edible flowers, that there's just
Yeah.
not enough volume
Yeah.
in any cocktail bartender, purchase to justify the labor.
Absolutely. Right.
And everything comes back to labor.
Yeah, absolutely. And Laurel's saying, thank you, super helpful. Well, thanks for asking the question, Laurel, because that's the kind of thing I didn't say in the book. I was honest in the book, but I didn't want to be such a like Debbie Downer. So here I can say, don't sell your flowers to restaurants. It's not worth it.
Janet is asking, when you say we should aim for a net profit that is between 25 and 35% of our gross, is her own salary included in the overhead and deducted from the gross?
Yeah,
So net profit is after she's paid herself?
great question. And I realized even in Flower Farming Business Academy, when I talk about gross revenue and net profit, I need to even explain things better because there's so many competing definitions of these terms, and we're all sort of coming from different places with it. So I'll just start out by saying, that of course your gross sales, your gross revenue it is the total amount of flowers or the total amount of products and services you sold, your top line revenue. That has nothing to say about your labor or your cost. So let's say you sell $90,000 worth of flowers in 1 year. That's your gross revenue. I tell people to sort of pencil in a net profit percentage of around 30%. And that's what she's referring to here. So I say I think 25 to 35, but this is what most flower farms see. And that might sound drastic to some of you, like, okay, if I'm selling $90,000 worth of flowers, I'm really only keeping $30,000 of that. But yes, there are so many expenses involved with running a small flower farm. Some of you might see higher profit margins if you're really small and you're not hiring extra help. But once you mature, once you become more sustainable, you're going to need to bring in help. You're going to need to start paying for additional things like bookkeeping software or bookkeeping services, all the insurance you didn't know you needed up front, pest and disease control for things that didn't creep up for you in the first few years of your farm, but they start to creep up, credit card fees once you stop dealing all in cash, that kind of thing. So your expenses are going to grow. And that's why I think like maybe you might have a high profit margin. If you're just getting started, you might feel like you have a higher potential than 30%, but I would really just try to like wrap your head around that 30% number as where you might end up landing. And again, it can be between 20 and 40%, but 30 is a good average. So when I'm talking about net profit of that 30% number, I'm counting the amount of money that's left in the bank after all expenses have been paid and the money you're paying yourself. So some of us are on our payroll and we are paid weekly through our business. I would count that in the net profit as well. Some of us are just taking the extra money at the end of the year and putting it in our pocket. I would count that as net profit. So however you are doing it in your business, I am counting the net profit in this conversation. I'm counting it as the money you pay yourself as the owner and the money that's left over in the business after you've paid for everything else. So it's a great question, and it's a question I get all the time because there's just so many competing definitions. So all we can do is define which
Yeah.
definition we're using and then move forward.
No,
Yeah.
that's helpful. And the flower dollar, I was just going to mention how useful this was when you spoke at the Slow Flower Summit this past year, but here it is in the book. And this is exactly what you're referring to, or why people think that they should be, they sell 90,000 but only have 30,000 to show for it. It's
Yeah.
all these costs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is a poster that I made in my farm stand. I started out by just um, doing it in chalk and then made nicer and nicer versions over the years. And I also tweaked the language and the visuals according to the feedback I got from my customers. Like I would see people saying, I used to call it's called profit here. I used to call it like owner's pay or something. And I kept hearing people sometimes in the camera at my farm stand, if I watched later the camera, and they'd say, but where's the profit? And I was like, oh, they're not understanding that what I mean by owner's pay is profit, or
Oh,
I had two different,
interesting.
so let's just combine that into one category, that kind of thing. Yeah.
That the nanny cam taught you that, huh?
Totally, the nanny cam was so creepy. I loved watching customer behavior in my farm stand. I was like addicted to it. My partner Matt would come home and see me watching some footage from the day on the computer, and he'd be like, "Stop, let the people just shop. You don't need to know what they said about your flowers." But I learned so much, honestly.
Oh my gosh, that's great. Well, this is such a beautiful graphic and just such a easy way to just for all of us to look at and start breaking down all the categories.
Yeah.
And these are top line categories. There's a lot of, I guess classifications underneath each of those. But
Yes.
one more, well, let's see, we've got about 10 more minutes. I'm going to save 5 at the end for Tonley to just talk a little bit about membership. So I'll throw a few more questions at you if that's okay. And then I want to
Great.
share the links to some things that Lenny's doing. Um, Autry Cataldo said that she's been selling to florists for several years. She's having some frustration with pricing, such as other farmers selling flowers cheaper, wholesale prices to compete with, and inconsistent florist orders. If she decides to go retail, which she's considering, how would you recommend that she markets bouquets for an 8 to 10 stem bunch for $30 when customers are used to Trader Joe's prices, even though she's got farm fresh, high quality product? I just think we have to not compete with Trader Joe's. That's my gut
Yeah.
feeling.
It's so hard, I know. And I definitely, my flowers, my retail flowers are definitely on the expensive end. I would definitely get a number of people. There was probably someone stopping at my farm stand every day who ended up saying, "Ooh, I could buy these for half as much at Trader Joe's," and leaving.
Because the
And
video
the
revealed
video,
that.
yeah, the video shows I could create a montage. It's probably illegal or something, but I was like, you know what, those are not my customers. But of course, I had built up my farm stand over like 5, 6 years. So I had enough other customers that I didn't worry about this customers. I totally understand this challenge. So I would say a few things. First of all, you're definitely not going to be able to, you're not necessarily going to be able to do that 3 times markup unless a number of conditions are true for you. So you have to really work at your design skills. You probably have design skills. I really, really focused on creating bouquets that were really beautiful and special and that looked really full, even though there were only, yeah, 8 to 10 flowers, whatever, in them. So I made sure that there were a few focal flowers, some really great branchy filler to fill up space, some greenery, different levels, really beautiful color combinations. I treated my farm stand bouquets as if they were wedding bouquets just from a design perspective. I made them in 30 seconds, but I made them with really specific color combinations that I just made up on the spot, depending on what we had blooming. I didn't have great big recipe programs going into my bouquets. Um, I created a high-end experience for my customers, even though it was a shack on the side of the road. You walk in, it was really beautiful, it was pristine. I had only really top line, like metal buckets, beautiful signage. I gave them lots of information about the farm. They were wrapped really beautifully. There were cute signs. And I kind of, I tried to both inform them about our farm and just make it kind of a boutique or like farm
Yeah.
chic
Yeah.
experience.
We saw the photo. It was
Yeah,
really appealing. Like, who
yeah,
wouldn't want to go there every day?
I know. I miss it so much. And so, you know, you need to work on it. I've seen other farmers that I've taught, they've had trouble creating these bouquets that they can create quickly. And so it's challenging. It's a challenge, but you just have to stick to it. And you might not be able to get away with that high of a markup as you start, but as you build your brand, you can try to raise it. So there's a bunch of farm stand
Well,
bouquets.
yeah, this picture is kind
Yeah.
of what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's hard. You know, you can never compete on price with Trader Joe's, as you know. So you just have to try to keep building your brand, trying to give your customers more of an experience, invest in the relationship with your customers, get their email, get in their email inbox so they can learn more about you. They can learn to know, like, and trust you. And yeah, that's my best advice.
I mean, these bouquets are not huge, but
Right.
they are really unique and have uncommon ingredients. And obviously these look like they were kind of spring because you've got some bulb flowers in there and
Yeah. Yeah.
anemones.
And spring is so tricky. It looks like also had last season's eucalyptus in there, which was great. But spring flowers are so hard because they're so valuable. They're so expensive. In the summer, you can make a huge bouquet with like zinnias and yarrow and call it a day. In the spring, the bouquets are just going to be smaller because the stem value is that much higher. So I
Got the
just
Orlea in there and some delphinium though.
yeah, totally. Right. So some fillers, some different branchy ingredients. Yeah, this is actually a great example. I talk about how I narrowed down my crop list over the years, and I used to grow like delphinium and stock and larkspur and all these spike flowers in the spring. And I simplified to just growing one main spike flower that would bloom at a time. So this was apparently like delphinium month, you know. And
Right.
yeah, you don't need a crazy large diversity of crops in order to have a robust bouquet program.
Mm, mm. That's great. Lenny is gave me some links to share, and I'm going to put them in the chat right now. You've heard her mention her courses. She has the course that you're doing now is an annual course. So when will people be able to sign up for that? Is that in the fall?
December or January. This year we launched it in January. I might try to do it a bit earlier last year. Yeah, and I saw Rachel in the chat here comment and say she's in the course and loving it.
Oh,
We're
I want
halfway
to.
through right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really
I
sweet.
really thank you for sharing, Rachel, that the course is worth it to you and that you took a leap and it's paying off. So
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And I'm the first to say that we don't all need to take a big course to get our businesses off the ground, and that's not in the cards for everyone. That is totally great and totally fine. My course is for people who are excited about learning and excited about, spending 8 weeks nerding out on these business topics to take their business to the next level. And if it's not time for you, I hope to be able to create a lot of other resources for you guys. I've been trying to pack my website with more resources, but
there's some great resources for free. And if people
yeah.
follow Instagram, the other link that, first of all, do join the newsletter because I feel like you're going to seed that with a lots of,
Yes.
little insights. But then you're going to launch your group coaching in March, and that's an opportunity at maybe a little bit more accessible pricing
Yeah.
for people to join in. Talk about what
Yeah.
group coaching is.
Absolutely. Thanks, Deborah. It's something I started last year, and it's honestly one of the favorite things that I do. Before I did the Flower Farming Business Academy, it was my favorite thing that I did. Now they're probably tied, but it's where a group of people sign up to work with me over the course of the year. So it's going to be March through December this year, really a growing season. And we get together once a month and meet for 90 minutes on Zoom in small groups. And it's a chance to have a little lesson. Like each time we do a little activity or a little lesson, but then the second half is a time to go around the room and each person to share a challenge that they're encountering on their farm right now. And then they'll get help troubleshooting that challenge from me and from the other people in the room as well. And they can also, if you don't have a challenge, most people always do have a challenge, but also you could share a triumph or something going really well for you. And it has been such a great way to create community throughout the length of the growing season, to check in with each other. It's so fun. And I think of these people as like close friends now. It's just been a
Mm.
we had great groups last year. And so we're launching it this year in March. You can sign up for it here on the
Is
website.
that this tab right
Yes,
here? Join my group coaching.
exactly.
Okay.
Yep. And I'm setting the dates for it right now. There's going to be a few different options each week, like a weekday night and a weekend morning. And if you can't commit to each month going to the Saturday morning session, you can switch to the Friday night, for
Mm.
example. It's totally
Hmm.
flexible like that.
Hmm.
And yeah, we're gonna close it off for signups in just a few weeks here. So I recommend checking it out. I would love to have you guys. It's about I think it's around $49 a month. Don't quote me on that. Whatever I set the price on the website is the price. It's right around there though.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an affordable way to get some small group attention and to get attention, get
Yeah.
help from me on your specific business challenges, but also to really connect with the other farmers. Everyone really got to know each other in these groups, which I really love. And you could be with farmers across the country with totally different skills, but you always have things to learn from each other.
That's a great tool to and tip for people. So I just popped the website up here so you can check it out. I think most people probably have already visited you and checked it out. But the newsletter is a great way to not miss out when these courses and coaching opportunities open. And then the group coaching is you're going to close it in a couple weeks, like mid-March or so.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Probably sooner than that, early March. Have yet to
Okay,
set the date, but
great.
get in there soon or email me if you have questions about it.
Lenny, thank you so much. This has been amazing. We are going to share the replay video, and I'll make sure that I also share these links in our show notes when this airs. We're going to run this as an episode of the podcast in a couple weeks. Before we wrap up, though, I want to find Tonally and ask her to jump on and add any announcements that she has. Tonally, where are you?
Yes. Hi. Sorry. I apologize. My camera is not working today, guys.
Okay. Okay. I'm
But,
like, I was telling you to turn it on, but I guess we'll hear your voice.
yeah. It just doesn't want to turn on today. I'm in the dark. So, for those of you who may have not met me, hopefully everyone here has met me at some point. My name is Tonally, and I am here to help you with all things member services here at Slow Flowers. And with spring starting back up, I just wanted to give you guys all a nudge that I'm here to help you specifically with event listings. So if anybody is a premium member, one membership benefit that a lot of people miss out on actually using is our event listing. So if you have a seed swap coming up, if you have a workshop, if you have a public speaking event, if you're going to be appearing at your local garden show, whatever these things might be, please, please, please let me know. You can email me anytime, membership@slowflowers.com, or you can go ahead and reach out through the help forum on our website, and I can help you list those things. You get one event listing per month. If you're a standard member and you'd like to upgrade, I can talk to you about that too. Yeah, so I just wanted to put that nudge out there to everybody.
I think Lennie Larkin needs to put her group coaching on our event.
Yes,
page.
Oh yeah, that's a great point.
Please do.
I'm sure Tonally can help you, Lenny.
Awesome.
The feedback has been super positive. People who are in your academy saying it's just been really valuable, and people who are eager to do it, people who've bought the book and find it so useful. And we are just so grateful that you shared today with this community, Lenny, because I know you're pulled in a lot of directions, and I can really see what a natural, I don't know, evolution for your business this has become to share all your experience with others. You're so encouraging and inspiring.
Thank you. Thank you for having me and for saying that. I've always valued your input in our industry, everything you've done for us. And I'm trying to fill another role in our industry and try to create resources for people and help them get their businesses ahead. So I take it seriously. So whatever I can do for all of you guys, reach out to me.
Absolutely.
I'll also, you know what, I thought of a tiny request that I should put out there, which is if you've read the book or if you've even started the book and you like it, would you leave me a review on Amazon? It feels like a cheesy thing to ask for, but it really helps with the sales of the book and hopeful future editions. So if you've read it, just leave a quick review on Amazon, even if you didn't buy it there. Misty's holding up. Thank you. I love that. Yeah.
Awesome. And, I forgot to mention, we are going to get back on our regular schedule of the second Friday of every month. So actually, we're going to meet again in 2 weeks on March 8th. We got a little thrown off due to Valentine's Day and the flower show schedule. So we'll announce the March 8th meetup in our March newsletter. So, which I don't have figured out yet, but reach out if you have ideas. And thank you all so much, and have a great weekend. And Lenny, thanks. We'll see you soon. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks. Have a great day.
We'll also do a drawing for the giveaway, one copy of Flower Farming for Profit donated by Chelsea Green Publishers, Lenny's publisher, and we'll send that announcement out next week too.